Vivek Patel is a conscious parenting educator. He has a beautiful site called meaningfulideas.com, on which he shares his views on spirituality and life and parenting and all things about awakening consciousness and non-coercive parenting mainly, I think he's going to talk about today. I think we're all here because we want radical change, right? We're looking for radical change, and people who have already made those changes or have tried and walked that path and have something to say about it are people that we look to today to give us some information or some guidance. So Vivek is going to share with us some of his guidance, some of his ideas, and hopefully give us some inspiration.
Wonderful, thanks.
Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say if there's any children here or babies here, they're totally welcome to run around and make noise and cry. Please don't restrict them in any way. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. I am a conscious parenting educator, so what I do is I help parents find ways to work with their kids non-coercively and harmoniously to create harmony and connection and cooperation in the home. Because the traditional parenting paradigm that most of us were brought up in, maybe everybody here, almost everybody here, it doesn't really teach us those deep skills. The traditional parenting paradigm is all about behavior. How is the child behaving and how can we modify that behavior? And I grew up that way, certainly. I grew up being spanked and punished and locked in my room and having things taken away, all to try and modify my behavior. I remember I was probably 6 years old the first time I ran away from home. I didn't even care. I just put on my coat. I don't even know I put on my coat. And I just walked out the door and I was like, I don't have to stand for this. I'm a human being, like that, 6. I knew that. Where was I going to go? I got down the street before my parents came and got me. And that didn't just happen once, too. It happened a number of times, and my sister, too. We talk about it, how she ran away, too, at such a young age. And it's because something in me knew that the coercion and the oppression that I was experiencing wasn't right for me. It wasn't right. It wasn't how we were supposed to be with each other. It wasn't how we were supposed to treat each other. I knew this at that age. And yet I grew up with a victim mentality because of that, right? Even though I knew that inside, it stayed in there somewhere. I think it stays in there for all of us somewhere. But I ended up with a victim mentality. Living in an environment where I was being bullied every day at home. It kind of went into me. And so when I went to school, I was bullied incessantly at school, especially in junior high. In elementary school, I was a bully, but I didn't really have any friends. I was that kid that would stand alone against the wall at recess and watch everybody else play. And if I did play, the kids were always just kind of using me. Like one time they told me, hey, Vivek, if you put your tongue on the pole, it'll be so interesting, it'll taste so good. And then they all ran off. It was after school, they all ran off and I was alone. And I eventually had to rip it off and I was But I didn't really think anything. I thought, this is what I deserve. This is my life. This is who I thought I was and what I thought life was about. And then in school, when I got to grade 7, I went to junior high. I became incessant bullying. Every day coming home with a bloody nose or a bruise somewhere. One day a kid punched me in the stomach so hard I bled out of my mouth. And I would have to get to school an hour early and leave an hour late just to not get beat up every time I left the house, left the building. And if the teacher left the classroom, I would have to leave with them because if I didn't, the whole class would converge on me. And they would take their big textbooks and they'd have one kid as a lookout, and then they would just beat me with their textbooks and me just trying to defend myself. And I remember one time I was in grade 7 or 8, and this one kid had me up against the wall, and he was punching me and shoving me, hitting my head against the wall. And there's this moment where he dropped his hands, and I thought, I could punch this guy right now. I could punch him and all of this would end. Because I heard, you know why I thought that? Because my mom had actually called the police and had them come over to my house. And their advice to me was, do more push-ups and punch somebody. And so I had this thought in my head, right? And I reached up like this, and I can still remember this moment in my mind so clearly. And I reached up like this, and I was about to punch this kid, and I thought, that's not who I want to be. That's not me. That's not what I want to see in this world. That's what I'm receiving. I don't want to do that. I want to contribute to something else. I didn't have all those words, but I couldn't do it. way, that was one of the moments really that defined my life, you know? So then, my wife and I deciding that we wanted to have a kid, I started to really think. I mean, I had been thinking since I kind of like started to wake up and realize that I wanted to do things differently, but especially before she came, we were really thinking about this, really thinking about how do we want to parent her, what do we want to do. I wanted to do everything different. Let's change everything, do everything opposite, right? Because I just didn't want my kid to go through what I went through, not only on the outside, but also the relationship with self on the inside. And I wanted to change that. So we decided from early on. Now my daughter's 22, almost 22. So this is a couple of decades ago, and there was no internet. I didn't know if anybody else in the world was doing anything different, because everywhere I looked, it was all traditional. But we decided from early on that we were never going to punish our child, never give her a consequence, never give her any limits of any kind, and never tell her she was made a wrong choice. Because I don't believe there are wrong choices. I believe there are only learning opportunities. But how can I, and we always say to kids, you know, mistakes are for learning, but how can we teach them that if we tell them that when they make a mistake, they're wrong? Right? So it's like, there's like this, the methodology and the intention often have a contradiction with each other. And we wanted to go all out. So that's what we did. You know, my daughter has never had a limit on screens. So, I mean, when she was 22 years ago, it wasn't really, screens weren't really an issue, or food, or sleep, or anything. And even if she did something was a huge mistake, you know, like she comes home and she says, "Dad, I swore at a teacher." They're like, "Awesome. Tell me why. What happened?" Did you choose the right word? And because I wanted to create a co-learning relationship. That's what was important to me. Because one of my sayings is that coercive influence decreases over time. Relational influence increases over time. And I wanted to have influence, not only and co-influence, right? We influence each other. I wanted to have that influence all throughout her life, not just for like the years that I was able to control her. You know, because one of the things I say is that chains come off in one of two ways. Either we drop them, or they realize that they really were never there, and they're free. And then at that point, often kids run wild. That certainly happened to me. My mother and I do workshops in prisons every week. It's really her show. I assist. So my 75-year-old mother, I call her Yoga. She goes into the. She's this big, and she goes into the prison, and she deals with these like tough prisoners, and she teaches the same non-coercive kind of relating philosophy, and she's been doing it for 6 years, and these guys often will say the exact same thing. I ended up in a life of crime because I was finally free. Just on Tuesday I heard that story, and he ended up with drugs and gambling and owing all these people money, and then he ended up with loan sharks, and then he's in prison, and he's getting out in a couple of months, and he's terrified. So we were trying to help him with how he can re-enter the world. I didn't want my kid to have to go through any of that kind of stuff. So, one of the reasons one of the things that we used as a guide was watching our child's like reaction to us. So if I said something and I felt or did something and I felt a closure, immediately I was like, okay, file that away. That's not how she wants to be treated. And I'm trying to be like that with every kid. Like just earlier, there was a baby here, and I went up and gave me a big smile. So I went over, and as soon as I went over, there was like a little tensing, and immediately I backed. And I said to the kid out loud, I said, "I honor your consent. Thank you for telling me how you feel." This big, right? But like the communication was so clear to me, I couldn't deny it. So from the earliest age, we can teach consent. From the earliest age, we can teach autonomy. From the earliest age, we can teach the power that kids have. We don't have to wait until they can talk. So the title of my talk, I like to make really long titles. The title of my talk is Honoring a Child's Essential Right to Freedom Contributes to Maximizing Their Learning Potential. And it's really not about any technique or system of education. It's really what's under that, the mindset that's under that. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the mindset, the learning mindset, the co-learning mindset, the learning partner mindset, and how to, what gets in the way of it and what enhances it. And that's something that's so beautiful to me, because if your kid wants to go to public school or an alternative school or homeschool, this is under all of that. This mindset underpins all of that supports all of it. I use the word essential right because it's like the sense of being free, meaning I have a right not to be coerced against my consent. I don't know if that's the definition, but I'm kind of just saying that. That sense of being free, of being a free human being, and wanting to respect that, I feel like that exists. When I am born, I'm free. When I saw that, when my daughter popped out, I was right there, and I was looking into her eyes. And the first thing I did was, when I looked into her eyes, she popped, the first thing, her first experience in this world was, I just looked into her eyes and I said, I love you, 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 for like 30 seconds. But just push the doctor's away. And she said back to me, and I heard it in my head, she said, Dad, if you treat me like most people treat their kids, I'm going to hate you when I'm a teenager. And I was like, noted. So, and so that's why we decided to do things radically differently. And so one of the things was that sense of essential freedom. Essential freedom doesn't mean we don't learn to collaborate. In fact, in the spirit of freedom is the only way we can really learn to collaborate. Because then we learn to really honor each other. The experience of being honored inspires us to want to honor other people's freedom. Inspires us to want to care for other people's needs. And this is what a collaborative community is really made from. And I also talk about honoring. So I say honoring a child's essential right to freedom. So honoring is really important. In every moment of our interaction with our kids, and even when we're not with our kids, but especially when we're with our kids, we have choice moments every moment. And there's a good side and a bad side to that. I don't like to use the words good and bad, but the good side is that when we make a mistake, we always have another chance, even the next second, right? And I do it all the time. I call myself a mistake-making machine. And a mistake-making machine because if I recognize that about myself, I can never criticize my child for making a mistake. And then we're learning together. But I always have that choice point, right? So when I come face to face with a choice point, I then have a chance to choose the opportunity to look at my priorities. Now, a lot of the time people don't have consciously set priorities. And I talk about parenting priorities and how we can have competing parenting priorities, which makes things very challenging. On the one hand, I want to teach them this. On the other hand, I want to respect them like this, and they seem to clash. And sometimes they clash irreconcilably. Sometimes they do. And in those moments, that's when it's important for us to choose our priority and to follow it, to honor it. Right? Honoring them means honoring that priority, honoring the priority of autonomy, honoring the priority of consent, honoring the priority of freedom, honoring the priority of relationship and trust. And so that's why honoring a child's essential right to freedom contributes to maximizing their learning potential. I'm going to talk about exactly how that honoring helps with learning. The priority. So for example, maybe one of the examples I like to use is ice cream. So my kid wants ice cream before dinner. And maybe I give it to them. And then they want a second bowl. and just before that, like an hour earlier, they said, Dad, I really want lasagna for dinner. Can you make lasagna? So I spent an hour making lasagna. And just before we're about that lasagna, they want 2 bowls of ice cream. It's really uncommon for parents to say, of course you can have that, me every single time. Of course you can have that ice cream. But I don't just say that. I'm like, of course you can have that ice cream. I love how you're listening to your body. Because listening to your body is how we really learn what to eat. Because your body is amazing. And sometimes we eat for fun, and sometimes we eat for nutrition. And I trust you to be able to learn to make that determination by listening to your body. And if ice cream is what your body is telling you right now, let's go for it. Every time the message was, I trust you. I trust your knowledge with your own body. I trust your knowledge. I trust your wisdom. And because of that, throughout all of her life, she's trusted mine as well. And she's always allowed me to influence her decisions. Influence meaning I share with her what I think. She thinks about it for herself. She integrates it into her own learning process, and then she comes with her own idea. And regardless of what the idea is, I'm like, let's do it. Because I want her to know that I trust her intuition. I trust her self-learning path. And it's so important, that sense of trust. Because the only reason, here's the thing, right? The only reason I can say no to that ice cream, the only reason is because I have power over her. I have systemic power over her. I have housing power over her. I have economic power, not so much 22, not so much. when she was 2 for sure. I have housing power over her. I have access to resources like food and water power over her. I can lock her in a room if I want to. I can like Carlos said, I can hit her if I want to. I have all this power over her. Plus, I have emotional power over her because kids are so attached to us, so dependent emotionally on us. I have mental power over her because I know things she doesn't know about the world. She knew way more than me when she was born, and I recognize that. But there were things I knew that she didn't know. I always say I could teach my daughter how to bank, do her taxes, and eat with a fork, but she taught me about play and curiosity and wonder and unconditional love and all that kind of stuff. So we really were co-learners with each other from the very beginning because that's what I saw in her. But the thing is, the reason that when we take our kids like the ice cream, when we take our kids' freedom away, or freedom of choice and freedom of self-determination away, even in little moments, what happens is they enter into a protective mindset. And this protective mindset means their focus is on protecting their sense of themselves, their autonomy. And it happens in different ways. And I'm going to talk about some of the different ways it happens. But it happens in different ways that we protect ourselves. But as soon as you protect yourself, and that's where your attention is, you're not learning in that moment anymore. I mean, you're learning how to protect yourself from the coercive environment that you live in. And we often don't even recognize that we're creating a coercive environment for our kids because it's such a normal thing. It's like the ice cream example. I use that ice cream example because it's deep. But screens are the same thing. That whole conversation we had about screens, the whole room was vibrating like this. And I love it. I was working with a parent recently, and their kid, 4 years old, every time, so addicted to the screen, every time, all day like this, or all the TV, or playing games on the TV. And if you would just walk in front of the boy, he would scream for 5 minutes because you got in the way of his TV. And so they tried limiting it, they tried unlimiting it, they tried everything, nothing was making any change. And so I talked about, but even when you unlimit it, you're still reserving the right to limit it as a parent with authority. And the kid feels that always, like, how long is this going to last, right? Whenever we switch from coercion to non-coercion, there's a transition period. Like Carlo called it the decompression. I call it the test, treat, and tornado phase. Because on the one hand, they're going to test you, like I just said, is this real? Is it going to last? I've never been allowed to choose my own food this freely before. Is this really going to last? I've never been allowed to choose when I go to sleep before and trust my body. Is it really going to last? And then the treat aspect, test, treat, and tornado, right? The treat aspect is that I want to revel in this freedom all of a sudden, and that's what I mentioned about the prisoners too, right? Me, in my own life, that suddenly I was free. I realized I was always free, but I realized I was free, and when I realized I was free, I went pretty wild. So that's the test of the treat, and the tornado is because all this emotion is bottled up inside. And it has to come out. But it doesn't have the freedom to come out a lot of the time. It's not just one thing, it's layer after layer after layer, day after day, year after year, being told little no's that build up. And then there's an explosion. I call it small moments affect big ones. The acronym for that is SMABO, small moments. Can we all say SMABO? SMABO. Okay, let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. SMABO. Thank you. I love SMABO because SMABO means every moment, every interaction I have is building another one of those layers, is building another one of those memories, is building another one of those neural pathways. And yes, I want to build healthy neural pathways. The most important one I'm concerned with, the one I have the most control over, is how I relate to my child. And that's the one that I wanted to burn really solid from the earliest days, that I was always the safe place. And because in that when we give that freedom, and they don't have to protect themselves, and they don't have to align themselves to an external expectation of authority, then they're able to look within freely and say, what's right for me in this situation? What makes sense to me in this situation? But we can only do that if we trust what the kid will find in there. If I don't trust that my kid will find compassion and love and respect inside, when they look inside, then yes, I have to coerce them to behave in ways that look respectful. But if I trust that inside their heart, and then not only their heart, but humanity, If I trust that, then I can, my focus then is, how do you look inside? What's real for you inside? What's authentic for you inside? And I trust that that's going to be what it's supposed to be, you know? And it's that sense of trust that really helps kids look at themselves, look for themselves, you know? And the other thing is that if we have this kind of authority mindset over kids, that I can tell you what to do, or I can tell you you can't do something. Not only tell, but enforce it. It's the enforcing that's the hard part. I can tell you stand up right now. You have a choice not to. If I had a gun, you may have a lot less choice. And we kind of hold a gun to our kids' heads in that way. It's not a physical gun. Well, for the most part, at least here in Toronto. But there's that sense of being free, right? But when you don't have that pressure over you, it's really easy. It's much freer and easier to look inside. Who am I? What do I really think about this situation? How do I really want to be in this situation? What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of relationships do I want? I talk about 3 main relationships that we work on with kids. And the first one is relationship with self, their relationship with their own self. The second one is relationship with the parent. Because that's so foundational, that lasts throughout their lives. I don't know if we said it, but there's some saying I've seen on Facebook that says the way we talk to our kids ends up being their own inner voice. And then the third one is relationship with the environment, which is other people and other systems, like the banking system, the educational system, the correctional system, justice system, and legal system, and all the different systems that they have to interface with. So if we can always be looking at how are we really enhancing their relationship with themselves, their relationship with the parent, and their relationship with the environment, then we have this like huge like a concept that we can use to always be guiding our kids non-coercively. It's really beautiful. By the way, just so you know, I am going to be posting this video in its entirety on Facebook and YouTube. I'm taking a moment of self-promotion here. My website, but also YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, although I don't really do Twitter yet that much, is all meaningful ideas. And I have almost 50 videos right now on my YouTube channel. And I have written over 500 articles at this point with Facebook and my blog combined on parenting and self-development. Self-development because that's half of conscious parenting is, you know, developing ourselves, healing ourselves, working on ourselves. So please visit. There's so much information out there, and I'm so happy to be offering all of that. Oh, right, the kid with the screens. Sorry. So the kid with the screens, he's screaming and yelling all the time with the screens, right? And so I went to work with the parents, and I actually I do home visits sometimes. And so I was at their place, and this kid had a screen. And usually they try and comfort him, whatever. I said, this time the screen was like, I can't even describe it. I'm sure you've heard that kind of screen, but it was like it was the tornado. That's why I named it tornado. Test Street tornado, right? It really was like a tornado. Instead of seeing it as a problem, because this family was in the process of releasing the limits, or releasing them in a cooperative and connected way rather than releasing them as just like try and regulate. So what happened was the kid had the screen went on for like 20 minutes. And instead of seeing it as a problem, we saw it as a learning opportunity. This kid in that moment was learning about their own emotions. In that moment, learning about how we saw their emotions. And because in that moment, like the parents and me, we were all together, we were really offering the kids support to express themselves exactly as they want to, and honoring the reason that they were doing it, even though the reason reasons are never like surface reasons, it's always much more complex. The kid had this cry, and then released the cry. And then the very next day, grabbed the phone again to start playing. And as soon as he started playing, he was starting to get frustrated. And I said to Mom, go play with him and enjoy it and ask him what he likes about it and get really involved. And she got really involved, and I went to the kitchen, and I came back. And when I came back 5 minutes later, they were building a fort out of the cushions from the couch. And the phone was like on the table. And so after a few days of working this way, now I got an email from a Facebook message from the mother a couple of days ago saying, Vivek, it's only been 2 months, and my kid is hardly even interested in their screen anymore. And she took all the limits off, but added this whole kind of, what I call a whole being co-learning relationship. A whole being co-learning relationship. we learn with our whole beings together, not just the mind. Not just learning is not just information in, information out, right? I think that's a perfect segue to my next thing. It is. Learning is layered and multidimensional. So, learning is layered and multidimensional. So learning is not just information in, information out. Like Carla said, we're learning all the time. From the moment we actually pop out, we're learning. You know, when we're in the womb, we don't have to breathe. We don't have to eat. We don't really get, I don't think you get hungry, but I don't think you get hungry. And you have your sensitivity to light is different, and sound is different, and I'm floating, I don't have to go with gravity. And all of this is thrust on us in a second. There's a lot to learn all of a sudden, you know? There's a lot to manage all of a sudden and figure out. And if kids are also in that, wondering if their needs are going to get met, wondering if they're going to be treated with respect, because like I said, that baby knew very clearly what they wanted from me, you know? If they're wondering about that and protecting themselves about that and learning about that, they're not learning about the things they really need to be learning about managing all of those different things, you know? Because this sense of having our needs met is survival. We instinctively know we will die. Now, probably for the most part, you won't die, but the baby doesn't know that. The young child doesn't really know that. It's programmed in that we're going to die if we don't get our needs met. And if we're always struggling to get those needs met, emotional and material sustenance needs, relational needs, attachment needs, if we're struggling to get them and finding strategies to get those needs met, then we're always learning that stuff. We're always paying attention to that stuff. We never get to tune in to what's authentic for us. We never get to tune in and learn about who we are and what's important for us. And not only that, but we learn quick that if you don't know something, you're somehow less worthy for it, somehow less acceptable for it. This is what the whole thing about grades that we were talking about earlier is part of that. Because that's not the only thing. Snabble is part of it too. It's every single moment that we interact with our kids. They drop something, they break something. Even if they break something intentionally out of anger because they know that it's gonna be a problem. Even if they do that on purpose. Because people say, oh, what if it's not on purpose? But even if it's on purpose, it's still a learning opportunity. It's still nothing I would ever say to a child, you shouldn't do that. Because they did it. And if I say you shouldn't do that, then they were wrong. And if you're wrong, you feel wrong. And again, I'm in that protective state, and I can't learn about it. But if I say it was wonderful the way you threw that dish, and look at all the pieces everywhere, and you can see like the pattern. Or, if they're really upset, I can see how upset you are. I'm sorry you're so upset. You know, it's totally natural to feel upset in a moment like that. I'm not going to say, but you shouldn't throw the plate yet. Right? It's so natural to feel upset that way. I feel upset too when something like that happens to me. Of course you would react. I'm so happy that you showed me how you feel so that I can help you. And this is a system of empathy I call EARS. And it stands for empathize, acknowledge, relate, and solve. And that's what I did. I said, I empathized. I said, I see how you're feeling. You're really upset right now. Sorry you're upset. And acknowledge is, it's natural to feel upset when you go through that. Of course it's natural. Relate is, I get upset too, and you're not alone. I get upset too in situations like that. And then if they calm down a little bit, you know, when I was young, I had a thing, and I did the same thing. Or I think you can tell a story about it. Really? Wow, you did that too? Yeah, of course, we all do that. It's hard, man. It's hard when you have that kind of pain inside. I get you. And then from there, then we can learn how to manage it differently. Right. From there, we can say, how do you feel about how you handle that? You know, because honestly, sometimes breaking a plate is not inappropriate. It's not. How do you know when to break a plate is appropriate and when it's not appropriate? There's only one way, really. Well, there's lots of ways. But we tune into our environment, breaking over someone's head, maybe not, breaking on the floor. I don't want to say you should never break a plate when you're angry. I've broken a plate when I was angry. I've broken lots of things when I was angry. We won't talk about that. Not on camera, anyway. All right. So, did I get all that? Ignorance, right. So ignorance. Ignorance meaning not knowing something. It becomes a problem really early in our minds. It's not something that's celebrated. You don't know that? That's wonderful. That's the most awesome thing. Not knowing something is one of the most wonderful things in the world. You know, it's this potential space for us. It's this open. This is part of the learning mindset, right? Being excited about what you don't know. It's different than feeling bad about what you don't know. And if you throw a plate on the floor, you really at that moment don't know how to deal with that emotion without throwing that plate on the floor. So many parents say, oh, they know better. But I really like to come from a position that a kid is always doing their best with what they have. And if they don't if they break a plate on the floor, they need to learn how to work with their emotions in a way that they don't. Unless they really want to. I always throw that in, because I always want my kid to feel free to break that plate, if she really needs to break that plate. Because that plate translates into so many different things when they're older. You know, Carla was talking about being on a date with somebody, and they're pressuring you into sex. And you were told, don't break the plate, don't make waves, don't make a big scene. You know. And I intentionally didn't gender that example. And to be able to feel comfortable, powerful, to say no, this is not right for me. And to take action on honoring, right? Honoring is the choice point, to taking the action on the choice point. I want my kid to have that power and that freedom inside themselves. And I can't do that. I can't do that if I coerce. I can't do that if I control. I can only do that by leading her to her own inner wisdom. So, okay. Any questions so far? I'm about to go into a slightly different topic. Yes?
What do I do? Okay, I'm just going to be curious. Example with the plate.
Yes.
Let's say, like my child broke my pottery mug.
Right.
It's like a special mug to me.
Yeah.
So I have a reaction as my own person.
Yeah.
Also, my child having their reaction.
Yeah.
Oh, my plate!
Yeah.
And I'm upset.
Right.
And they feel that, and it's out before I can even, it's there.
Right.
Right. What do you do with that element?
It's a really great question. So, so there's two parts. One, there's in the moment, and two, there's kind of like the education around the issue. Right? The education around the issue is being able to care about other people's feelings, so that the next time you have someone's precious thing in your hand, you can think make a self-motivated, self-regulated choice not to break it. I call it SMSR, self-motivated self-regulation. I have a lot of things like words, because I work with parents all the time. I'm also part of an admin team of a parenting group that has almost 30,000 members, and it has this very clear philosophy. It's aligned with this of no punishments, no consequences, and always working in a collaborative mindset. And so all day long, for the last 3 years, I mean, I've been doing this work for 10 years, but with the Facebook group for 3 years, hundreds and hundreds of questions, 30,000 members, there's a lot of questions that come in. Gentle Parents Unite. Thank you. Good question. Gentle Parents Unite. And it was started by my good friend Sujai Johnson. And if you want to pull out your phone and join it now, you're welcome to. You don't have to keep your phones hidden around, hidden away. So that's the first part, right? And to do that, when I want to teach something, I never go direct, right? I never say, you should do this next time. What I do then is I say, I put it in my mind. I want to teach this, that. Or I want to inspire. I want to say the word teach. I like to say inspire and help learn. Because help learn is different than teach. Teach implies I have something, and I'm giving it to you, and then you have to have it. No. We're called to teach each other. All throughout our lives, we teach each other. Like I said earlier, she had things to teach me that were way more valuable, I felt, or at least equally valuable. I say way more to be poetic, or at least equally valuable as the stuff I had to teach her. She never felt, correct me if I'm wrong, but she never, this is my daughter back here, by the way. She never felt like I acted like I knew more than her in any circumstance. Is that true, do you think? Yeah. And, but about the moment, right? So in the moment, I want to react to my kid in a way that's going to help them self-reflect. And if they're concerned about having hurt my feelings in that moment, it's going to be hard for them to self-reflect. Because again, they're going to enter that, I hurt mommy, I'm in a protective mode. It's different when they're a little older and have had this experience with you a lot. But for little ones, I want them to feel really, really, really safe and comfortable to self-reflect. And so sharing emotions is I think, helpful with them, but later in discussion, different than in the moment. Now, if you do burst out, because we all do, I actually have 3 versions of ears, 4 versions, which are exactly equal. So the first one is ears, the second is years, and the third is sears. I call it ears, years, and sears. And then there's also pre-ears. So I'll talk about years a little bit. So years I talked about is empathize, acknowledge, actually have acknowledge, affirm, and appreciate. It's all 3 words. And then relate, and then solve. And solve means enter into a co-problem solving relationship. It doesn't mean solve the problem before that, right? But then years is when you yell first, and then you realize that's probably not the most effective choice in this moment. I didn't say wrong choice. Probably not the most effective choice. And then I backtrack, and then I go to years, right? So years. And the second is sears, where we jump into the solution first. You know, if you just pick up that toy and you put it over here, you won't step on it next time. You might not break it. They're so upset the toy's broken, they can't hear that solution. You should have done it. So I jump into the solution. I see the solution's like bouncing off like this. You can actually see it, you know. And so when I notice that, then I stop and I backtrack. I go, that was really hard for you. I can see that was really hard for you. Even mid-sentence, when I notice it, I'll stop. You know, you should. That was really hard for you. I can see that was really hard for you. You know, and it's natural. Again, I'm doing years. It's natural that would be hard for you. Of course, anybody in that situation, you would have an emotional reaction to that. I'm so glad that you showed me your feelings. I feel that way too when I go through something like that. Thank you so much for showing me. I'm sure we can work on this together. And so years, and years, and then pre-years is when you know you're going into a difficult situation. Maybe you're going to your in-law's place or something. And you know you're going into a difficult situation where there's going to be hard emotions. You can give yourself empathy for the pain you're going to feel by going ahead of time. You're going to get angry, you're going to get upset, you're going to want to argue, but he's not going to hear you, man. So just take a breath and love yourself and trust yourself. Before I go in, right? So pre-years. But years, sears, and pre-years. Does that help? Okay. Thank you for asking that question. I'm going to go on. I'm sorry if I'm not getting every question. I won't. But also can hang out if anyone wants to ask questions after. Okay. Plus I have 50 videos and 500 articles that you can read too, which is a lot of stuff. All right, I want to talk about right now how complex learning is. I talk about learning on the mental, emotional, physical, and social levels, and also spiritual and relational. Thank you for your support here. So it's mental, emotional, physical, social, and relational. And I kind of throw spiritual into emotional because they kind of, it depends on your own personal way of relating to those words. But just in each one of those things, it's so complex. So for things that we learn that are on a mental level, for example, our language, math, need-meeting strategies, cause and effect, we're learning all these things. But in each of one of those, they're so complex. Like even just language, right? So there's so many different kinds of language. There's formal language, there's casual language, there's swearing, there's polite language, there's rude language, there's stories and poetry. Language is used as stories and poetry and analogies, and there's also nonfiction. So there's all these different kinds of language, and to learn all of that is very complex. One of my other lines is, I didn't teach my daughter not to swear, I taught her how to swear. Yeah. Because swearing is a very complex thing too. Sometimes swearing is being angry at something. Sometimes swearing is showing appreciation for something. And each of us can make a decision on, so what we would do is we would look up all the swear words and talk about all the different contexts of all the swear words and all the different potential effects of all the swear words on different people in different contexts so that she could make her own personal decisions based on her own values and the kind of relationships that she wants. And so all of this is why, just in swearing, it's so complicated, right? And just to take, if you really look at learning and wanting to help your child learn about their relationship to swearing, because it's an important social skill when they go out into the world to be able to manage that. That's a lot of learning to take place, right? We also learn about math, for example. Math, there's life math. I love that Carlo is saying life math, right? There's life math. Life math is so good. Life math is... There's this meme on Facebook that says, another day goes by and I didn't do algebra. Right? And my response to that is, in order to know that you didn't do algebra, you have to think, how many times did I do algebra? And then get the data and plug it into the formula and realize you did do algebra. So you did algebra to be able to say, you cannot say you didn't do algebra without doing some algebra to find that out. Right? Simple algebra. It's one variable and one number, but it's still algebra. We use algebra all the time in life. But we don't call it that. But if we did, Suddenly algebra is everywhere. Physics is everywhere. Art is everywhere. Language is everywhere. And in every moment, if we have a co-learning, whole being co-learning relationship of equals. Oh, that's the second one. I just recently added that. For programming, there's a whole being co-learning relationship of equals. If we have a whole being co-learning relationship of equals, then we no longer have like occasional learning, or we're going to sit down and learn. Like the whole life becomes a learning relationship. So then we have emotional things, like I mentioned, self-motivated self-regulation, learning about all the different variety of emotions that we have, and the subtle levels and different elements of each of those emotions. I mean, you can say anger, but there are so many different kinds of anger. You know, you can say joy, but there's so many different kinds of joy, so many different reasons for joy. And there's so many different emotions are complex. And then you have two completely opposing emotions at the same time. That's so confusing. And so we have all these emotional things to learn. And we can be helping our kids learn those things. And then we have also things like attachment and rejection, but also like the concept of sitting with an emotion rather than running away from it because it's too painful. Yeah? Sitting with rather than sitting in. Or repressing. Sitting in an emotion or repressing an emotion. Both of those don't teach us. It's more like emotion controls us. But if we form a healthy relationship with our emotions, then we can flow with them. We can hold them. We can sit with them without having to rush out of them. They don't destroy us. And this is a lesson that we can inspire our kids and help them learn. I almost said teach. That we can inspire our kids and help them learn from an early age if we sit with them in their experiences, regardless of what they are. And so regardless of what they are, that's the key point. There are no emotions that are unacceptable. There are no expressions that are unacceptable. Because if they're unacceptable, we can't learn about it. Yeah, we can't investigate them. We can't think deeply about them. Because as soon as because then I can't do that again because I've been told it was wrong. But then I don't know why. I don't have the chance to really make that choice for myself. So sitting with versus sitting in or repressing. Then we have physical things to learn. We're still talking about just the kinds of things to learn, right? There's walking, talking, eating, playing, fighting, all sorts of things that we have to learn physically. And like I mentioned, breathing and managing hunger, and all these different physical experiences. And then if you have any kind of physical challenge on top of that, there's a whole other level to work with. And then there's social. You have to learn social norms and cues, facial expressions, and tone of voice, and all these things, and what do they mean? It's so complicated. These kids, these little ones, are learning all this stuff at the same time, all the time. You know, social norms and cues, facial expressions, how to manage different personalities, even on the playground. What's polite versus rude? What's thought of as polite versus rude? And if I'm in a system where there's politeness and rudeness there, how do I want to relate to that system? Because at home there's no politeness and rudeness. At home there's process and principles and authentic expression and communication. But you know, when somebody asks this question, when a kid goes out to the world and has to deal with systems of consequences and has to deal with coercive systems, then how do we help them with that? You don't have to mirror. I always say that it makes sense to teach about coercive systems, but you don't have to create a coercive system in your home to do that. You know, we can teach about, hey, you know, when you go out into the world, this is what it's going to be like. This is what teachers think. And this is how other kids think because of how their parents think. And this is how to manage that. How can we manage that kind of thing? See, I said, this is how. And I changed it to how can we. I'm watching my own language all the time. And how can we is so different than this is how. Right? How can we means, I want your ideas equally as much as I want to share mine with you. And let's think about this together. And then there's social. I just said that, right? And then, right, social systems and hierarchies I mentioned as well. It's like teachers generally think that they're in a higher position of authority than the students, right? I always told my daughter, when you go from kindergarten, when you go to school, there's no adult that has power over you. There's no adult that has authority over you. And you can do anything you want, say anything you want. It's nice to pay attention to people's feelings, but don't feel that any adult has power over you. And you can always tell them that, and I will always back you up no matter what. That was the message that she had. And is an incredibly kind and compassionate person because she knows herself well enough that she doesn't have anything to prove. Doesn't have to fight for feeling okay about herself. So learning, right. And then relational, right? So relationship with themselves, but also relationship with their parents, relationship with other adult relatives, and other adult friends, and then adult strangers, and adult authority figures like doctors and police and teachers, and principals, which are somehow different than teachers, which are different than teachers' assistants. All these different levels of hierarchy. You're worth more. You have more authority to say what someone else can do and what they can't do. That whole system is like fucked. Thank you. And teaching a 2-year-old that it's fucked is really worthwhile. Yeah. I say that compliance and resistance are two sides of the same coin. I don't want my kid to comply, and I don't want my kid to resist. I want her to be authentic. I want her to tune into her environment, tune into other people in the community she's interacting with, tune into her own intuition and her consciously chosen, non-imposed values, and then make a decision based on that. Yeah? That makes so much more sense to me than a rule or how you're supposed to behave. And then they have to deal with peers, and then peers meaning kids of their own age, and then older kids and younger kids. All of these different things require different skills and different awarenesses. You know, even a kid that's a grade or two older, it's like, well, I don't know if you remember being in grade 4, but a grade 5 and 6 is a whole different being. You know? So then we have all these different kinds of learning. But in each of those kinds of learning, there's layers of learning. So we can learn, there's two parts of that. One is the learning that we do the same thing on deeper and deeper levels. For example, my grandfather, God rest his soul, as they say, he one day said to me, I said to him one day, hey Grandpa, I learned something new every day, do you? He said, no. I said, oh, okay. He said, you don't either. I said, no, really, I do. He said, okay, give me an example. So I told him the story about how somebody had insulted me, and I got really upset, and then I thought about it, and I realized it was really their projection, or something like that. And then I realized that I don't have to take things personally. I can, form a relationship with myself around it. Something like that. And he said, didn't you already know that? Did you just tell me that before? I said, yeah, but I learned it on a deeper level, because if you already know it, it's not learning. That was his concept, right? It was, I had the words, and so the learning was done. But for me, even today, I'm learning that, That was probably 30 years ago that I had that conversation with him. And even to this day, I'm still learning that same lesson on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. To say you've learned something, it's a lot of self-deception in there. Even something like 2 + 2 happens on levels, Even just learning the idea that there's a concept of a 1 for a young person is hard. Because 1 doesn't really exist in nature. Or a repeatable 1 doesn't really exist in nature. The concept of 1 + 1 = 2 is very much a mental concept. There are no two things that are the same. You can never have two. You can never count 2 apples. You can count 2 approximations, but both apples are very different. They're different colors and different shapes and different masses, and there are different numbers of electrons, and there's different numbers of cells, and different things happen. So much happening in an apple. To hold 2 things up and say that's 2 apples, you have to make a lot of approximations to do that. It's not really 2 apples. And then there's electrons jumping and going. And what about the electron? But even if they were exactly the same physically, they're still in 2 different places in space and time. Right? They didn't come from the same flower. I can't put them in as 1. So I'm kind of approximating to say 1 and 1 = 2. 2 what? 2 very different things. Right? So the concept of, even just learning the concept of 1, and then a repeatable 1, that doesn't exist, and because kids don't have, little ones especially, don't have labels for all these things. You put 2 apples in front of them, they see 2 things. Maybe not even 2 things. Maybe they see the whole flow of that existence. Yeah? Kids see things in a very different way than we do. Whenever I'm in front of a kid, I'm like, please teach me that. Please. I want to know what you know. What's it like where you just came from? That's the feeling I have when I'm with kids. That's why, when my daughter and I are in the grocery store, kids crawl out of their stroller to come hang with us because they sense that how we honor them, how deeply we honor their wisdom. And it happens to us all the time, right? Yeah. Yeah, complex. It's complex. So not only do we have all of these different things that we learn emotional, mental, physical, relational, and social things, but we also learn each individual thing on all those levels. So I learn math mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, and relationally. Thanks. For example, baseball, right? For me to throw, may I? For me to throw this ball across the room, I have to know the speed that I'm throwing it at, the velocity. I have to be able to be in tune with gravity enough to know the parabola it's going to take so it doesn't go over our head or right here. I have to know all sorts of math and physics to be able to do that, but I'm not thinking math and physics. And to catch it, hopefully I'll catch it, and to catch it, I have to be able to calculate this trajectory. That's a lot of complicated math to do that. There's parabolas and x and y and physics and calculus, I don't know. And I don't know the book math for it, but clearly I know the physical math for it, right? So there's just something like math exists on all those levels. And every single one of those things that we talked about, all the different forms of language, all the emotional, physical, social, and relational things, we also learn on all of those levels. It's so complex. It's so complex, right? And my friend Tanya Williams, who is from Kitchener and is part of the learning community, I was talking to her yesterday. And I said to her, Tanya, what do you think about this idea? And she said, Vivek, it makes me think of, and she called it complex systems humility. Love that phrase. And complex systems humility means I recognize that the system I'm working with, and the system in this case is my developing child, all of their emotions, all of their feelings, all of their physical learning, all of this is so complex. I just described briefly how complex learning is and how it's always happening on all these different levels and all the levels and all levels within the levels. I want to have the humility to know that I'm on a learning path and as much as my child. I have no authority. I don't know more. You know, I know more about some things, but she knows more about other things. And having that humility puts us both on this learning path together. And it's a completely different way of seeing things, a completely different way of feeling. Because like for me, one of the most important things was to create a relationship with learning itself. You know, more than just learning a thing, I wanted to create a relationship with learning. And when my daughter came home from school in like grade 6 or something, she came home and she used to love to paint and draw. We had art. We still have art from her from when she was young all over the house, right? And she came home from school one day. She said, "I don't like art." And I was like, and honestly, when she was in grade 6, I knew a little less than I know now. So I said, "Oh, really? What happened? Why?" I wouldn't do that now. Now I would start with the empathy. That's Sears, right? Kind of Sears. Now I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That must be really hard for you to come home. Just don't feel that way." I could totally understand that you're feeling that way now. Sometimes I feel it. I'm going through the ears thing, right? Really, it's so good. Yeah, but I didn't try and fix it. At least I knew that. I didn't try and fix it. But what I did was I filed it away in my head, and I thought somebody has said something to her. For this to happen in one day, somebody has said something to her. But when I asked her that question, no, nobody said anything to me. So fine, I wasn't going to argue. Because where's that going to get me? Where's that going to get us? But what I did was, I started to think about how can I help her repair or heal this wound. And when I want to work with kids on something like that, what I do is I set a really long-term plan. So I thought, I'm going to give myself 10 years to work on it. Yeah? Because if I try to fix it in a month or two, there's going to be all this pressure. Fix. I don't like to use the word fix. If we can learn about this together, if I try and learn about this together, even saying learn about it together in a month or two seems so unrealistic, right? It's a deep, emotional wounds are deep. And to work through them, it takes a long time. And so what I would do was, anytime she would draw anything, even a line, I would go, oh, I like this part of the book. And when we were to look at art, I'd say, oh, I bet you we could do that. That's pretty interesting. And now her and her mother have a weekly date to go to the art gallery, and they paint together, and they pull out the paints, and now she's painting. I told her the story, I don't remember that. So working with our kids, it's not something that has to happen. But when we try and work on these things, they don't have to happen quickly. I'm teaching things like empathy and self-motivated self-regulation, SMSR. Teaching these kind of things takes years. See, I said teaching again. Working together to learn together these things. I'm still learning self-motivated self-regulation myself. These things take years. If we can think of things as 2 years, 10 years, 20-year arcs for learning together about things, then it just frees us. It frees us to be in this moment with our child and look at the learning opportunity before us. Right, because if we approach everything from this learning mindset, right? So I want to always see my daughter as on a learning path. Every single moment, everything that she does. And every kid, when I'm interacting with every kid, and I try and do with adults, it's harder with adults. Oh, really? But I'm getting better. But especially with kids, I see them on a learning path. They can, in my presence, they cannot make a mistake. They cannot do something wrong. And they feel it deep inside. I'm accepted like that? Wow. Yes?
I have a question. How do you do those long learning paths when they're in a system? Because your daughter went to public school.
She went to public
where
school.
It's like, by grade 1 you must be reading, by grade 2 you must know numerous, but you know what I mean? Like, how do you honor your way and be in that system?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, it's very similar to how I talked about how to work with kids about coercive systems, right? What I do is, and I always do this is, I say this is the system that you're going into. These are the good things about it. These are the challenging things about it. How can we maximize the good things and mitigate the challenges? You know, yes, your teacher is saying this, and yes, the grade says this, but you can learn to read whenever you want. You know, and I want you to get the kind of grades you want to get, and I want to work with you to do that. What do you want to learn? What's interesting to you? She went to those school because she wanted to, but we treated it like other school. You know, so for me, school was an experience for her, another learning experience for her. I didn't really think she was learning academics there, but I knew she was learning a lot. And so to be in that system with her and seeing it from the non-coercive perspective, it helped her to always have a perspective on what she was experiencing. Anytime she was given a punishment or a consequence in school, it never touched her heart, because she knew that wasn't what she deserved. She knew that's not what humans deserve. So she was able to kind of hold herself. Am I right about that? Okay. Are you okay with me asking you that once in a while?
Go for it.
And yes.
But how did you have the power to all the time be aware and take out the world out of her? Like,
Yeah, I just.
because like if you're overworked and you're in your own
Yeah.
problem, sometimes you're not there for your
Yeah.
child to recognize, and then just easily the
Yeah.
magnet of the world pulls you in.
It's so true. And it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because I'm on a learning path too, right? And knowing that I'm never going to do it perfect helps me to have more compassion for when they don't do it perfect. It's never going to be perfect. We can only do what we can do. But if you even only have 5 minutes a day with your kid because of how hard you work, and you operate from this perspective, it's still going to get you and them much farther. It's never going to be perfect. She's wounded. I couldn't help but pass on my wounds to her. I couldn't help that. And I knew that. I used to joke in the early days, there's another thing for her to talk about with her therapist when she's older. And, because I wanted to have compassion for myself when I did something like that, you know? So it's not about always doing it right. It's about always, well, that's why I have years and series, right? Because I know I'm going to yell sometimes. I know I'm going to jump to a solution and try and fix her sometimes. You can only fix something that's broken. Yeah? I didn't want to fix her. I didn't want her to ever feel broken. But I made tons of mistakes all the way through. That's why I call myself, did I mention it already? I call myself a mistake-making machine?
Yeah.
I love that phrase, right? Because if I can acknowledge that every day and in every moment, really, I'm making some kind of mistake. And in all my relationships and in all the projects I'm working on and all the things I'm interested in, there's nothing we can do but make mistakes side by side. So the learning, I remember when my kid was like 3 or something like that. My kid, she's right there. I remember when my kid was 3 or something like that. I actually have a video of this. One day I'll post it. I have a video of this. So, and I'm telling you the story because it's like how I look back on it and think, wow, I really learned a lot. So she was telling us, we were sitting together, and I said, tell me, yes?
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, 10 minutes then.
Right, and then questions, right? I was told I could speak till 4:15 is what I was told.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. I've been planning on 4:15.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to go over. So, no. I lost my place. Oh, right, the story. So I asked her to tell me a story. And her story was, once upon a time, the end. Now, if a kid told me that today, I'd be like, that's a brilliant story. I love how creative it is. And I don't have to guess. But then I said, no, tell me a little more. Come on, give me some detail. And when I look at that video now, I go, because at that moment I told her, your story's not good enough for me. Yeah, I was thinking, I want to help her develop her creativity. But that's not what I did, right? That's not what was really happening. And I want to look at what really happens. That's why I look so deeply into what is learning and how does it work. That's why I look at what is emotional regulation and how does it work. What is resilience and how does it work? One of my sayings is, speedy repression is not resilience. And we often think that if you can just get over it quick, that's resilience. Bounce back, we call it. But I prefer to think of it as going in and going through. Resilience is integrating your experience into you. And then coming out the other side with deeper learning, deeper self-knowledge, and deeper knowledge of the thing that you went through. That's resilience to you, because it builds you. Yeah? I want to talk a little bit about, so this talk has largely been about having authority over kids, which is the traditional mindset. And then releasing that mindset and entering into whole being co-learning relationship of equals, and which is so different. And that from that place, if you release authority, like really release authority, what that means is, unless someone is going to die or break their legs, you don't say no. Because I can't say no to you. I can't say no to you. I can't say in the same way. I mean, I can say no about my own consent, but I can't say no, you can't have a bowl of ice cream. I can't say no, you have to go to bed now. I can't say any of those things to my partner or to my friend. I haven't got that kind of authority over them. I can make suggestions based on their lifestyle if I think it will help them, but I can't tell them what to do. I can't enforce that in any way. And removing that same, even though I have the systemic power. So systemic power, my saying is systemic power is power that you didn't choose and can't refuse. That's what systemic power is, right? That's why I have housing power. And economic power and access to resources. And if I never use that power, I have it, but I can also choose to never use it. And if I never use it, and I put it back there, and I don't even consider it, I don't hold, that's one of the problems of taking limits off, is if we hold the prerogative to put them back on, and I'm not having really left the coercive relationship, right? I've never given a limit to my child because I never considered myself to have authority over her. Everything we did was learning together. So some of the things to avoid, I call it the don't do's and the do-do's. Some of the things to don't do are punishment, consequences, complaining and violating consent and autonomy of our kids. Giving up, being able to give up all punishment and consequences. Now, if you tell a kid, hey, I'm disappointed in you for doing that, that's an emotional consequence. If you say, you made that person sad when you did that, that's an emotional consequence. Yes, it's great for the person to learn that their actions create emotions in other people, but to tell them that from the outside in doesn't teach them that from the inside out. They feel like, oh, I did a bad thing. And then they're focused on that, right? Where do they learn that from?
Yeah, what would you do instead?
Yes, it's a really good question. I can't answer that in 2 or 3 minutes. No, really. That's why I have 50 videos on YouTube and why I have 500 articles, because that's what I teach. Well, right now I'm teaching the mindset, and just briefly doing the don't do's and the do-do's. Yeah. But how you teach that is the whole being co-learning relationship of equals. That is what it is. Every opportunity is an opportunity to learn that. Like I'm walking down the street and the father is yelling at his kid and we talk about it. I see an ad on TV and we talk about it. We're playing and something happens and we talk about it. If something happens to her and we talk about her feelings. I don't say, and other people also feel that way, so you shouldn't do it. I trust her to make that connection. Yeah? But doing it once or twice over a week isn't gonna do a lot. That's why I say the big arc, right? The 20-year arc. If you do that for 20 years with your kid, guaranteed they're gonna learn to tune into their own to discover and tune into their own value system. If you think it has to work in 6 months and they're going to figure it all out and not make any mistakes, then you're going to be banging your head against the wall for a long time. That make sense? Yeah, and the actual do-do is a very comprehensive thing. This is the way I teach how to teach. The way I help parents learn how to do that is very comprehensive. There's so many parts to it. Because it's also about our relationship with ourselves, too, right? Yes?
Can I just say something?
Yes.
We're often so worried about, how are they going to learn this? How are they going to learn that? But there's certain milestones
milestones when they're little. Like, we're not teaching them how to walk. We're not teaching them how to crawl.
Right.
We're not teaching them how to, like, they learn.
Yeah, and that's why I say that inspiring the learning mindset is what really is important, right? Each individual thing. And plus people learn at different rates and in different ways, and we have all these different ways we learn, visual and oral and physical and all that kind of stuff. And this, like, learning is a complex thing, right? To imagine that you can control someone's learning is unrealistic. But we can help kids. And now when I say help kids learn, like develop a learning mindset, it's more like help them nurture the natural learning mindset they were born with and not get in its way, right? That's what is really important. And so for me, all the things all the don't do's and the do do's that I share are all about how to keep that learning mindset alive and let it keep being nurtured. And I'm going to stop soon. I'm going to say two more things. One is about curiosity, and somebody mentioned curiosity during Carla's talk as well. Curiosity for me is one of the most beautiful gifts you can offer your child. Is to always be curious about their experience, always be curious about their thoughts and feelings, always be curious about their opinions. I always approach things with curiosity. Curiosity has no prejudgment in it, or post-judgment. It's just, I'm just curious. I'm really curious about you. As a human, I want to know about you. What do you think? What do you feel? What's important to you? And that relationship is so powerful. Now, when I'm trying to decide what to do, so here's the last thing I want to mention. And then we'll have a few minutes for questions. One of the ways that I decide if, so first of all, I have set a very strong priority over freedom, autonomy, consent, and authority, or non-authority with my child. So I always have that as my base priority, and I kind of compare everything to that. I have other priorities as well, like health and education. I don't even know what my other priorities are, really, honestly, because I think so much about that, and life just kind of flows from that. But what I do is when I need to decide on whether this falls in line with that priority or not, and I mentioned this earlier, because I imagine, this is an imagination game, I imagine me with either my best friend or my partner, and me put myself in a similar situation. And would I want to do that to them, and would I want them to do that to me? Would I want to be told that I have to go to bed regardless of what my body feels? Do I want to be told that, and like here it's different, but like in a more traditional audience, I would say, do I have to be told that I want to learn this thing, even though I don't want to learn it? Do I have to be told all these things? Me, not the kid, me, right? Me as an adult. If somebody says you can't have a cupcake before dinner, this is going to spoil your dinner, I'd be like, well, thanks for telling me, but I really want the cupcake. And I'm actually okay if I don't eat my dinner today. I'll be okay with that. And if I do, I'll have a little less. I really want that cupcake. And I want a second, yeah. Oh, and then, here's the example I gave, right? So my stomach is hurting because I had 2 cupcakes, and I want a 3rd. Now, sometimes I'll say, I don't want that. But sometimes, for me, it's worth it to have a stomach ache to enjoy that 3rd cupcake. Not really, but sometimes it is, right? But I mean, I'm using cupcakes. But maybe it's relationships, maybe it's the job, maybe there's so many different things that we have to make those kind of decisions over. So I put myself in that position. And then who can stop me from getting that 3rd cupcake, even if it doesn't make sense? No one can stop me. Maybe the police, like I had the gun, right? The police and jails, people with authority who can fire me from my job. Even then, I can accept that consequence. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm ever doing to her what I don't want someone to do to me, or what I wouldn't do to my partner or my friend. That's a really hard way to do it, because it really changes a lot of stuff when you do that, honestly. But it works. It works really powerful, because it really helps you focus. Yes?
Using the cupcake example,
Yeah.
and knowing that, for instance, sugar can be more addictive than protein.
Yes.
How do you deal with a child that's in that 3rd cupcake do any learning?
Yes.
I mean, I guess you have a 10-year trajectory.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm always very hesitant to get my child into a situation where they're in that state.
Right. Well, I mean, if you can non-coercively avoid it, then that's great. If you don't have cupcakes in the house and they don't miss them, that's great. But to help them learn to really regulate the sugar and not have them go full on into sugar the moment they realize they don't have to listen to you. It's really important to form a relationship around it where they don't feel coerced about it. It doesn't mean you don't educate them about it. It just means that you don't do it in a way where they actually turn off.
I do what you say, it's just, I'm nervous about them getting into a situation where they've lost that control.
Yes, I understand that. I understand that. And all I can tell you is every single time that I have helped parents let go of the limits, have never seen it not happen. Every single time the kid figures out what's real for them. Like it involves the whole interaction. Every time you experience food, every time you work with food, every time you watch other people eating food. Like the education is kind of all over the place, but it's easily absorbable for the kids because you're not telling them, therefore you should be doing this. Yes.
The one component of letting go that I found that I can't get rid of my fear on is them hurting themselves.
Ah, yes. Like climbing to a tree or something like that. Yes, and that's natural, you know. I think all of us have control issues that are hard to let go.
That's the one that I can't.
Yeah. And so many of those things come from our own past, where the freedom that we received, and
just a mother's heart, like, oh God, I just don't want it to happen.
Sure, of course, it's reasonable.
So how do you?
And well, that's the question, right? What's the most effective way to get a kid who can't watch 24/7 to have a sense of their own safety? It's certainly not by restricting their exploration, right?
No.
Yeah, but it is about you can look at a tree and explore how can we interface with this tree safely and still have the maximum fun. You know, that kind of learning goes on continuously. It's just, you see how it's like continuously going back to the learning and the exploring.
I let them do it. It's just that my kids are clumsy and constantly hurt themselves, and
Right.
they'll go back and do the same thing again and
Right.
do it again.
And so they should.
I know, but I just watching it and like, oh.
Yeah, I
man.
hear you. So much of this, that's why my blog is like.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, okay, forget it. I'll go over there and Dad can hang out with you.
Yes, that's a good strategy.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I have 5 minutes to finish these questions. So who next? Yes.
I was just thinking about authenticity, and I'm hearing you talk about something will start to come out of your mouth, and then you stop it, and you take it back, and then you're switching it up. And do you find that kind of impedes your ability to be all the way authentic? Like if I was like Andrew and my mug got broken, and I'm like, it's a really authentic thing, and I want my kids to feel safe also. But I also want to be really authentic with them. And how can I do that both?
Yes, good question. It's a really good question. Did everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So, right now, as a 50-year-old having a friendship with a 22-year-old, I am a lot more free to express my emotions openly. The full diverse range of my emotions. And she has the capacity to receive that and not be hurt by it, not be afraid by it, because we have slowly developed a relationship in which that safety exists and where her experience was of receiving safety for her emotions, naturally wanted to offer that back. At first, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't just express all myself to her, it's too vulnerable. Yeah? But to develop the capacity, to help develop the capacity, I'm just using develop right now, to develop the capacity and the relational resilience to be able to handle my authenticity. Like last year, my sister got sick and my mother got sick and in the hospital over and over again, and I was the only caretaker, and I ended up with a pretty severe case of caretaker depression. And it was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life. And you know, my daughter was there through the whole time. I was able to really do what I needed to do and be what I needed to be, and she was there always to support me. And we had a beautiful supportive relationship like that. But it doesn't have. But with like little vulnerable kids who are just figuring all that out, it's hard to do that right.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll save it for later.
Sure. And, you know, the interesting thing is each of these questions is another workshop. And I'm going to actually have to stop taking questions just now, sorry. But I'm not going anywhere if you want to ask. So please, you can friend me on Facebook. On the event page, I put a bunch of my articles on there. I've been putting articles on there as I've been writing leading up to this, you know. And so please find me on Facebook, join my social media, and just like take advantage of all that information that I put out there. And I'm just constantly writing. And I really appreciate your engagement and your openness. So thank you very much, everyone.